Welcome to the Awakened Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Walters. Get ready to create magic and miracles as you lean into your heart's desires. I believe not only does the heart want what it wants, but it knows. This show is a weekly deep dive into what it means to live from an awakened heart. I'll be sharing inspiring stories and real conversations with people just like you, who have turned the ordinary into the extraordinary. My mission is to show you how you too can be connected and heart-centered in every area of your life. Your journey to aligning with more love, more joy, and your wildest dreams come true starts now. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Awakened Heart Podcast. Today's episode is very relevant as we are finally seeing the beginnings of spring. If you're in the Midwest like myself, I'm in Michigan, and we're finally getting some warmer weather, some sun, everything's starting to bud. It's beautiful here. We're coming out of the deep freeze, which means a lot of us are going to be outdoors a lot more. I'm a huge nature lover myself. I've got woods right behind my house. I love being outdoors. But yet there's a hidden danger that's lurking around. And it's not something that I remember hearing about so much as a kid. I grew up camping, I grew up in the outdoors, and I didn't hear very much about this. And it's a really misunderstood disease. We're hearing a lot more about it now because it's been misdiagnosed so many different times. And there are so many more people that are speaking up about it and advocating for others and bringing awareness around this disease, Lyme disease, which is absolutely devastating if not caught and treated early. Today's guest is someone who knows firsthand what it means to climb life's toughest mountains and come out stronger, wiser, and more grounded on the other side. Aimee Goodwin is a certified life coach, emotional resilience trainer, and the founder of the New Hope Healing and Resource Center in Minnesota. She's also the author of Victory, a Lyme Story, and her newest book, The Mountains We Climb, both of which chronicle her journey from surviving to thriving. She's also the author of Victory, a Lyme Story, and her newest book, The Mountains We Climb, both of which chronicle her journey from surviving to thriving Lyme disease, which is caused by the bite of an infected black-legged tick and affects an estimated 476,000 people every year in the U.S. alone. And those are just the ones that are reported. It's often misunderstood, misdiagnosed, and left untreated, leading to chronic symptoms that can last for years. And Aimee knows this all too well. She spent 7 years battling Lyme, not just the illness itself, but also fighting to be seen, heard, and properly diagnosed within the medical system. In her first book, Victory, she shares the darkest parts of that experience and how she ultimately found her way through. In The Mountains We Climb, she takes it a step further, offering practical tools for anyone facing emotional, physical, or mental challenges, showing that the path to healing is possible when we shift our mindset and build emotional resilience. Today, we talk about what it means to reclaim your power, how to stay hopeful through pain, and why your story, no matter how difficult, can become the most powerful part of your purpose. Whether you've faced illness, grief, or the weight of a life you don't choose, Aimee's story is a reminder that healing is real and that you can rewrite the ending. Hi, Aimee. Welcome to the Awakened Heart Podcast.
Hi, I'm excited to be here.
I am excited to have you here as well. And this is a conversation I haven't had yet on this podcast. And I know that this is something that affects a lot of people. I had read that it affects something like 400 and something thousand people a year, Lyme disease. And your story is a really powerful one, how you turned that into something that has empowered you to help others. And you've written a book that recently just came out, 2 books actually. Your first one was The Lyme Story in 2014. And then you just released The Mountains We Climb just last month, and now it's #1 on Amazon. I think that's pretty incredible. And I would love to hear from you. Your journey with Lyme disease was long and incredibly challenging, and I know a lot of people face this as well because it can be so misdiagnosed as something else other than what it is until the disease gets really It's amazing that a little bug can create such a debilitating illness in somebody. And it's not that often talked about. Can you take us back to the beginning? What were the early days like before you even had a diagnosis?
Yeah, and going back to the number that you just quoted, honestly, Lyme disease, I think someday when we know what the real number is, we
Mhm.
will all just be shocked, honestly. I think the number of people dealing with this disease and the number of people who have a misdiagnosis like I did is going to be staggering. In my story, before I even had a diagnosis, to go back to when I very first got sick, I was a young mom, had just had my fourth son. I was in those months of, you know, being a year out from having my last child, knowing he was my last child, hitting the gym 4 days a week. I was feeling really strong and healthy. And I went from that state to being so sick, crippled by pain and deep exhaustion that I had to cancel my gym membership in 3 months' time. It was that debilitating. I, of course, went to the doctor. I'm a really strong person. And to add to that, I'm a pretty stubborn person as well. So it took me a while. I powered through for a while and then just got to the point where I was like, something is really wrong with me. I don't know what it is. I need help with this. I went to the doctor. They ran all sorts of tests. They tested me for MS. They tested me for a lot of neurological diseases, Lou Gehrig's disease, even Parkinson's disease. I saw neurologists. I spent a lot of time with a lot of different specialists trying to find out why, as a very young person, I was suddenly so sick and crippled by pain. Nobody could help me. Nobody
So
had any
frustrating.
answers for me. And I ended up in pain management where a doctor told me, I have to give you a diagnosis. I don't know what's wrong with you, but if I don't give you a diagnosis, I can't help you with your pain. And so he gave me a diagnosis of fibromyalgia. And
Mm.
that's where I was for 5 years before I got my diagnosis.
How did you finally find someone that gave you the correct diagnosis?
Well, it's a long story. It's a long story, but I'll give you the short version. So, I had a couple of really great doctors, and I don't believe in coincidences at all in life. I've just lived long enough to not believe in that anymore.
Mm.
And my mom was on her way to work. My mom is a nurse. She was on her way to work one morning, and she was listening to a local radio station, and there was a doctor on the morning show of that radio station who was advocating for Lyme. It was like Lyme Awareness Month or something, and they were out educating people on Lyme disease, which was pretty rare and unheard of at the time. And this person was talking about a documentary, Under Our Skin. And when my mom got to work, she called me and she was very excited. I could tell as soon as I answered the phone. She's like, "Oh my gosh, Amy." She started talking and all excited. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, mom, I chased so many, like, right. And I talked to so many doctors. And unfortunately, a big part of a lot of people's diagnosis is being kind of treated poorly by the medical field
Yes.
and being ignored or told you're crazy or you're drug seeking. And unfortunately, that's part of it, the story of a lot of people's story, not just my story. And so I just really wasn't excited to chase another wild ending. And before my mom hung up the phone, she said, Amy, you have to check this out. These are your people. And that really caught my attention because I didn't know anybody like me. I didn't know anyone else who was suffering like I was suffering quietly. And I knew something was killing me. I just didn't know what it was.
Mm.
And so that got me off the couch. And back in the old days, right, we didn't have our phones or I had to go to the computer room and get on my computer. And I typed in that documentary, Under Our Skin, and the world of Lyme disease just opened up for me.
Mm. Ooh, I just got chills.
And I just read one story after another and watched one story after another and saw one doctor after another. And mom was right. These are my.
Mm.
And so, yeah, from there, I called my husband. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have Lyme disease. This is what's wrong with me. I just need to get diagnosed so I can get treated. He was like, yay, let's do it. Call your doctor. So, and at that time, I was very naive and I thought this is how easy it's going to be. And I called my doctor, I made an appointment, and that's really where I met my first resistance. And I wasn't my regular doctor. My regular doctor had left my clinic. And so I was kind of in between doctors. And they told me I was foolish. There was no such thing as chronic Lyme disease.
Wow.
They made me sign a paper saying that I would pay for this test should it my insurance company deem it ridiculous.
How long ago? This is about 7 years ago. I know there's been a lot of
Several.
changes.
It was about 15 years ago, a little bit
Wow,
more.
okay. 'Cause I seem to be seeing it a lot more,
Yeah.
people talking about it.
Oh, for sure. It's much better now, though not perfect now
Mhm.
still. So, of course, I did all that and, fought for that test, and my test came back negative. And so then felt like, "Oh, I was defeated," I went through all this, came back to square one. So, went on just as I was, for a while and had talked to established with the primary. My aunt had this same pain doctor. And that my pain doctor, I'd had an appointment with them a few months later, was kind of talking to them about this. And he said, you need to pursue this. This is something you need to pursue because you don't fit fibromyalgia. You're too young for fibromyalgia. There's something going on with your nervous system. You need to pursue this. And so I did. That sparked me a little bit. And I just decided, my husband said, if we're going to pursue this, let's find somebody who knows what they're doing. Really wasn't anybody in Minnesota at the time. And so I ended up flying to California where I met Dr. Harris, who's a great Lyme doctor who quite frankly saved my life. And from there, the Lyme world really just absorbed me. My local newspaper, towards the end of my treatment, did an article on me. That's really when the Lyme world absorbed me. And I started working with patients who would call me, knew my story. They knew I was getting better. They wanted to know how I was getting better. That kind of sucked me into working with people, establishing support groups. I started working with Minnesota Lyme Association for a while, helping establish support groups and really working with Lyme patients everywhere, establishing friendships. I did that for many years, really getting sucked into Lyme awareness and really spreading the word, helping people know what to do when they had Lyme, where the good doctors were. And from there, really just developing this frustration of why do we not have these resources for people? Why do we not have, cancer people? If you have cancer, you have cancer clinics where you can go and have everything you need for these treatments. Why don't we have that why is Lyme so hard? Why can't we have doctors that believe us? Why can't we have treatments that support our bodies? And I always tell people New Hope, our New Hope Wellness Center was born out of frustration. Why don't we have these things? And pretty soon, why don't we have these things turned into, can we have these things turned into, we're going to have these things turned into, I'm going to make this place turned into, we have New Hope Wellness here in
Mhm.
Alexandria, Minnesota.
That is quite a story, and I know that a lot of people with so many other disorders, like, they go back and forth to the doctor, like, for years before they get diagnosed with the correct thing, and finally there's a doctor out of the hundreds that they see that it's like, "Oh, it's this," and then they start getting better, and thank God you had your mom, like, she was a blessing, and you were at the end of your rope at that time thinking that, "I've tried everything," and then she was persistent, and there you are.
Yeah.
There's your crowd.
Yeah. I was really sick. I was really to the point of, again, very healthy person to dragging a leg about every fourth step. I was a
Wow.
singer who could now no longer sing. I couldn't control my vocal cords. I had no control in my voice anymore. I couldn't carry a gallon of milk because I couldn't
Jesus.
grasp. I didn't have the muscle strength to grasp to carry a gallon of milk. And
Mhm.
I had 4 little kids. Like,
Yes.
my fears were I wasn't going to be there to raise my children anymore.
So
Again, I
scary.
said before, I knew something was killing me. I didn't know what it was, and
Mhm.
my biggest fear was that I would die before I even knew what was killing me,
Oh,
and when you live your life like that, you can't, at least for me, like, when you survive something like that, and then all of a sudden you have, you know Lyme itself is a terrifying disease. It is not just a difficult disease, it is a horrible long treatment. The
mhm,
average treatment for Lyme disease is 18 months to 2 years,
mhm,
especially if it's something like me where you've had it for 5 years or longer. It's not a quick, "Oh, I'm gonna take antibiotics and be better in a week." That's not what
mhm,
happens, and something I'm really proud of at New Hope is we have now these state-of-the-art treatments that people aren't doing in a five-state area. We're not just doing the same old treatments. We're doing the new treatments. We have great doctors. We have a powerful team here, and it is a powerful stop for anybody dealing with this disease. And
mhm,
I'm super proud of that. So it's not just go to the doctor and do this. It's like you come here, you're being taken care of, your mind's being taken care of, you have powerful treatments, you have your body's being taken care of. This is a powerful stop for you. This is everything that I didn't have when I was looking for help.
Now, for those that don't really know what Lyme disease is, I'm sure people have heard about it. And I know it comes from the deer tick and the bacteria that they inject. And it's not every single tick. Can you explain what Lyme disease is and what some of the symptoms are and what some of the treatments are? I know you have a completely different way of approaching it. I know some of it is your emotional resistance. You help with that. Emotional resistance and healing is part of what you do at New Hope, correct?
So Lyme is a complicated, that's even a hard question to answer because Lyme affects everybody a little bit differently. What Lyme is you basically you can get Lyme mostly from a tick. We can get Lyme from other things. For example, I have two sons. We went on a hunt, on a hog hunt in Texas, and I had two sons who were bitten by fleas, and they were infected with Bartonella, which is also a tick illness.
Wow.
So we mostly get Lyme disease from ticks, but you can get tick illness from or Lyme disease from other things. So that's the catch-22, right? But mostly we're talking about ticks, right? So we get Lyme, anaplasmosis, ehrlichiosis, babesia, Bartonella. Those are all tick disease. So those come largely from ticks. Deer ticks are a big offender, but all ticks hold disease. So that's a big falsehood too, where people are like, oh, it's not a deer tick, so I'm okay. No, you're not okay. If you got
If you
bit by
get
just
that
regular,
bullseye, yeah.
right, you can get it from anything. The bullseye is also a false, right?
Mm.
Hopefully you're lucky enough to get a bullseye, but only 50% of people do.
Oh, so there's no
I
warning.
did not see my tick. I did not
Mhm.
get the bullseye.
Oh,
So when I got sick, we weren't sure what got me sick. My doctor actually suspects that I got Lyme from a spider bite
oh,
because 6 weeks
worst
before
nightmare.
or about 8 weeks before I got sick, I was doing yard work under our deck and I had a spider land on my neck. I slapped it. I know it was a spider. I felt it bite me. I squished it in my fingers, threw it. I had a classic rash, went to the doctor.
Mm.
They were like, "Oh, you have cellulitis. It's okay." 8 weeks later, I was so sick. I was feeling symptoms. 4 months later, I was canceling my gym membership.
Wow.
So, we're not sure, right? And that's where some of the research that now is being done. So we know we can get it from other things. Now, when we're out in the woods, we need to be cautious. Michigan has a lot of Lyme as well. California has a lot of Lyme, and a lot of people. I've had people say, "Well, I'm from Colorado. I don't have Lyme, or we don't have Lyme in Colorado." I'm like, last time I checked, ticks don't stop at the border. So we all have Lyme. It travels to different states on animals, on birds, on people. So if you're out in the woods or fishing, even on the lake sides or river sides, and you have any suspicious symptoms, flu-like symptoms, a rash of any kind, if you're bitten by a tick and it has any kind of a redness to it, a lump underneath it, if you develop fever, flu-like symptoms, those are symptoms that you need to be aware of and that you need to treat. You can also take a tick and send it in to be tested. That's a very simple and easy thing to do. We do it every year. Ticks are out. They're just things to be aware of. And after what I've been through, I'm a huge outdoors person. And I have a lot of people say to me, how can you even be outside? Like, how can you even go outside after everything you've been through? And I just respond with, hey, I'm not letting Lyme take one more thing from me. It took a lot of things from me, and I am not letting it take one more thing. And I love to be outside,
Mhm.
but we're very aware. I have four sons. We're all hunters. We're all fishermen. We're all campers. We love to be outside, but we have a regiment. And when we've been outside, we check for ticks and we come in and we check again before we go to bed because anything we missed on the first check, we're going to find before we go to bed. So, and if we find a tick, we check it, we check, or we send it in to be checked. If we have any kind of a reaction, we treat it. And then you're not going to end up with a chronic sickness or illness like what I dealt with.
You get it in the beginning. It's crazy, like, I've spent my whole life outdoors. I love being outdoors in the woods and stuff, and it's only over the last couple of years that I've heard about ticks and Lyme disease and how devastating it is and to watch out in the woods, and it's good to be cautious, but why didn't we hear about this so much back in the day? Like, we'd run around as kids through the woods, and I don't think our parents said one thing to us. I mean, of course, I was a '70s baby out and about.
Well, I think there's a couple reasons for that. One, I don't think our parents knew the danger, right?
Mhm.
There's a lot of people, I think, who had Lyme then. There's a lot of misdiagnoses for Lyme now. MS is a huge one. Parkinson's is a big one. There's a recent study on Alzheimer's brains where they weren't even looking for Lyme. They were studying something with Alzheimer's brains, and they found in 9 out of 10 brains
Wow.
they found the Lyme bacteria in 9 out of 10 Alzheimer's brains. And that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier when I was talking about we don't even know the cap on this yet. So Lyme has been around for a long time. I think it's kind of being disguised under misdiagnoses right now.
Gosh, my mom's got Alzheimer's, but that is quite the statistic. And I remember we were out, my friend and I were out at a park and we just like laid a blanket out in this field and we left. And then I think 2 days later, she called me and she said, "Oh, I found a tick crawling in my hair." Two of them she found. But I think they were in her house, but it kind of freaked me out. Like, I didn't have any, I didn't see any. And then she found one in her car. I think somebody pulled one out at her work. And I remember, like, I think a week later, I felt the back of my neck and there was a lump back there. There was something like crustate. Oh, God, when you mentioned that, I thought about it because it was like on the back of my neck and it crunched when I pulled it out. I'm like, oh my God, what was that?
It
So,
is probably
and
a
I had
tick.
showered. Oh, and I had showered. I was like, what is that? And the bump went away and stuff. And I had someone look at it. It was
Yeah.
nothing. But just, I remember that crunch. I'm like, what the heck was this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, keep an eye out for any symptoms.
Well, it was a long time ago. It was last year. So, and I was
And again, not every tick has Lyme. I will say
mhm,
that, right? But if it's a deer tick, a great many of them do.
mhm.
Yeah.
Something so small can be so devastating.
Yeah, it really can. Lyme
Crazy.
disease is devastator of lives. It really
Yes.
is. Yeah.
Yes. Well, gosh, I'm glad there's people like you out there that have, such a support for someone that feels so alone. They're suffering through so much without their doctors, like, gaslight them and then them not knowing enough about it and going for years without treatment. Like you're like a beacon of hope for everyone. Like New Hope is perfect because they have new hope that they can be treated and live a normal life.
Yeah, that's my big goal really at New Hope is, because honestly, I know what that feels like. I know what that's like. When you're going from doctor to doctor, that was one of my big lessons, I think, through that. There were so many lessons through that. But one of the big lessons I learned was to advocate for yourself. You have to advocate for
Hmm.
yourself. We all we're kind of raised to trust your doctor, to listen to what they say. And I'm not dogging doctors. There's a lot of good doctors out there. But, doctors are overworked. They don't have the time in their schedules that they used to have. Many of them are so very specialized that if they don't know, they don't know. And
Hmm.
honestly, most doctors just don't have education in Lyme. They just don't know.
No, it's
And
pharmacology now,
yes,
it
and
seems
if you
like.
don't know, you don't know. If you don't have there's a saying in Lyme that if you don't get it, you don't get it. And that
Mhm.
means if you haven't got Lyme experience, you don't get it.
Mhm.
And so you really can't waste time with doctors who aren't educated in it, and that's just the bottom
Mhm.
line. And you have to find a doctor who is educated in it. And once you find that, then you have hope when you find somebody who knows what they're doing. And that was something my doctor said to me many years ago when I was first sort of kind of be overwhelmed by the people in Lyme who were hearing this story that I had of recovery, and they just hadn't heard this story. They hadn't experienced that themselves, and they were looking desperately for hope. And they were coming out of the woodwork. They were calling me. They were emailing me. I was even people from other countries. My phone was ringing in the Target bathroom stall.
Mhm.
And I asked my doctor, what can I be telling these patients? Because I was still such a baby in Lyme myself. And he said the number one thing that you need to tell everyone is that they need an ILADS trained physician to help them with their care because that is going to make all the difference. And an ILADS trained physician is somebody who is a physician who has been trained by the National ILADS Association in Lyme disease, which means they know how to treat Lyme. And so in the beginning, I started to tell people that because he said it. And now I tell people that because I have seen that that is true. So when people come to our clinic, I can tell them that and I can say, I always say, I'm so sorry that you need us, but I'm so glad that you have found us because you have found an amazing team with a doctor who knows what the hell they're doing, with a team who is going to be here with you, fighting with you every step of the way. You are not alone. And there is hope for tomorrow now. There's hope that you're going to get your life back.
Mm.
And you are not alone. And people need to hear that when they're in a fight for their life with Lyme.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Now, in some of your first book, In Victory, A Lyme Story, you wrote so vulnerably about your darkest moments. What made you decide to share your story publicly at that point in your healing?
Well, good question. I think what made me write so vulnerably, I can't even say that word today. What made me write Victory, I did feel very vulnerable writing Victory. I'm a very private person, more so than I am now. I think before that was very much before I had learned the power of being vulnerable, and I still felt very raw in my story at that time. But I was already learning how powerful it is to sit in a support group for people and for somebody who had been so alone in their struggle to hear somebody telling their story and be understood and to realize that they didn't even have to speak a word and to know that in this room they were not judged and that they were understood and that gave them courage to stand up and fight. And I had made a couple really good friends along the way in the Lyme world at that time. And I was doing some public speaking at that time about my story. And these friends said to me, you have to write your story because you need to reach more than you're reaching, that people need to hear that you can recover. People need to hear that there is hope with this disease because nobody knows it.
Mhm.
And so that inspired me to be vulnerable and write my story. But it was very vulnerable.
And there must have been so many rewards with after you put that out, and you probably heard from so many people how it helped them in their own lives and their journey with this disease.
Yeah, I still hear that here at the clinic, and, that's the best part of my job here now still is I mean, probably and always very well timed, again, I don't believe in coincidences, but
Mhm.
because we have hard days here at the center, like, Lyme is a heavy disease, people struggle, and some days are hard and long, but it's always a very well timed, "I prayed for you, I prayed for this place, and we're here now. I prayed for a place like this, and I'm so glad you were courageous, and
Mm.
you saved my life, or I ran a marathon. I never thought I'd be running
Wow.
a marathon again, and that's why we're here. I believe a power way bigger than me put us
Mhm.
here, and that
Mhm.
makes it all worth it.
Because they say God doesn't give us more than we can handle, and He gave you this. Thanks for the gift, God, but it's used as a catalyst to throw you into the work that you were born to do, your purpose in life. And writing these books and creating this center and helping all these other people in their darkest moments is such a great gift to the world.
Yeah, and I think it's the mountains we climb, right? Like,
Yes, yes,
that's how I got
exactly.
to the mountains we climb. It's the mountains we climb, and when we're climbing mountains and when you get to the top of a mountain like Lyme disease or depression or anxiety or whatever it is, for me, I can't just sit at the top of the mountain and be grateful I got there. I gotta turn
Mhm.
around and be like, "Who needs help getting up here?" Like, "Hey, we made it. Like, let's get everybody up here."
Mhm, and that leads to your latest book, The Mountains We Climb, which you just mentioned, and that's doing so well. Your newest release. You guide readers through overcoming life's obstacles. How does this book build upon the foundation you laid in Victory?
Well, I think a lot of my foundation, started with Lyme. I wouldn't say that it all started with Lyme, but a big part of it did. Life is not always easy. In fact, I think it rarely is. And I think if we have that misconception of I'm just going to cruise through and everything's just going to be easy, we're in for some
Mhm,
disappointing
mhm, we're the proverbial, universal 2 by 4.
Right, exactly. Exactly. But I think that's kind of where mountains come in, the mountains we climb. It's really about just establishing some of those foundational tools for emotional resilience. What makes us emotional resilient? What makes us able to power through some of those hard times? And can we develop that? And we know that we can. Science tells us we can develop emotional resilience. And I think through struggle, after struggle comes joy. And that's what life is really all about. And so if
Mhm.
we can figure out how to get through the struggle, a little bit smoother, we get to the joy. And that's how we develop. That's how we do develop that resilience. That's how we do find peace. And as I've been a coach and as I've been working here at New Hope, with our Lyme patients, and I run my own practice out of New Hope as well as an emotional resilience coach. I really was seeing, especially after 2020, I think that really exposed us as a society in some things that we really
Yes.
are in need of. And having just the pauses of life, having just the ability to self-assess, having the ability to just, okay, where am I going to pivot from here? How am I just going to get myself through this without throwing myself off the edge, right? Like,
Mhm.
how am I gonna do this? And so that's really what the mountains we climb is about. We all have mountains to climb. We all have struggle. I don't know anybody in life who doesn't, and we all need to develop these skills. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, the foundation for mountains came from my Lyme journey, from grief, from losing a child, and that's where
Mm.
the foundation started.
Losing a child, I didn't know about that. I was just going to ask you, you've climbed metaphorical mountains, and can you share a mountain that was especially pivotal for you and how you navigated it?
Yeah, well, I think losing a child is
Yes.
yeah,
My God.
yeah, is a very pivotal mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I had an interview once where somebody asked me I don't remember the exact question, but I thought it was a good question. He asked, "Are you just like a Pollyanna of life?" And I think what he was saying is, "Are you just somebody who's just happy all the time? Are you somebody who's just naturally just floating through life?"
Mhm.
And I said, "No." I kinda laughed at him and I said, "No," and anybody who really knows me would probably laugh at that question too. And the truth of it is I've had a lot of struggle. And when we lost our daughter, I laid on the ground for a long time.
Mhm.
I laid on the ground for a
A
long time.
Pollyanna is denying and not feeling everything. Everything's all like spiritual bypassing. Everything's so
Right.
wonderful, but you
Yeah,
are
no,
not.
I laid on the ground for a really long time, but I think at some point we all have to make the decision to get up or to stay on the ground.
Mhm.
And so I think some of my foundational resilience, even though it felt really far away from me at the time, did able me to get off the ground.
Mhm.
And from there, it just really was one step at a time. But I think when you survive something so devastating, and it was devastating,
Mhm.
everything for me compares to that. Because I do think that sometimes I think if that didn't kill me, nothing's going to kill me.
And from that, you've become a certified emotional resilience trainer. So, having to get yourself off the ground after such a devastating loss, you had to have the emotional resilience. So, what does it mean to you? Like, what does emotional resilience mean to you? And why is it such a cornerstone in your work?
Yeah, I think emotional resilience is a cornerstone because you will never convince me that it can't be done. You can't convince me you can't be done. It can't be done. You won't convince me you can't survive it because I know you can. I know you can even survive when you don't want to. Because there was a time after my daughter died, I didn't want to.
Mhm.
That she died and I lived, and I resented that, you
Right.
know?
Mm.
And and I still lived because I was supposed to be here.
Yes.
And the human spirit is just so powerful. And so I know without doubt, I know with certainty that survival is powerful and that the human spirit can heal and the
Mhm.
human spirit is resilient. We can heal from devastation. We can heal and come back from the darkest of places, and that there is light even in the
Mm.
darkest of places.
Mm.
I know it because I've walked through it.
Yes,
And so I think that makes me a powerful coach.
you are.
I can sit in the darkest of places because I know there's light, and I can bring people out of darkness because I've been there.
Mhm.
And I can't really explain it other than that.
How has your journey with illness and healing shaped the way you live your life now?
Yeah, I was just having this conversation the other day because I'm gonna be 50 this year.
Look at you. You're a young pup. I hit 55 years ago. I just turned 55.
Wow, you look
Crazy.
beautiful.
Thank you.
I was just having this conversation because a lot of my friends,
Not
we're
that
turning
bad.
50 this year, and some of them are really dreading it. And
You're
I'm like,
alive.
"You know what? I'm not dreading it because
Mm.
I'm a nana now, and I just think
Oh,
that's the funnest thing in the world."
yeah.
And I'm so proud of a lot of things that I've accomplished. And there was a time in my life, and I mentioned earlier, when I had Lyme and when my daughter died again, that I didn't really want to live.
Mhm.
I didn't think I'd make it to 50, and I didn't think I would make it at all. And so here I am turning 50 when I didn't know if I would be 50 someday. So I'm living it up. Like,
Mm.
when you have a disease that you think is going to kill you at one point in your life, when you tomorrow isn't certain, you live your life differently. And so to
Mhm.
me, 50 looks pretty good.
Mhm. Yes, it's good. Here you are, and you're helping so many people around the world with, bringing awareness to it and emotional resilience and your books and your powerful story, supporting others through their struggle. What do you want people to understand about those silently struggling with chronic illness like Lyme disease?
Yeah. And I'll even expand that. So anybody struggling with anything silent. So anybody struggling with Lyme disease, and I'm going to expand that to anybody struggling with chronic anxiety, anybody struggling with depression, because I see that a lot through my office. People who are just generally silently struggling, because there's a lot of silent struggle out there amongst men and women. Recently I heard a statistic which was just startling in the mental health world, which is 70% of us are living in fight or flight, which
Mm,
fight or flight is we're going to die, right? Like, fight or flight is tiger chasing us and we're going to die.
mm.
We're living
Your
like
mind
that in
doesn't
our
know the difference.
day-to-day life. And our nervous system doesn't know the difference
Mhm.
between tiger chasing you and I had a stressful day at work. So
Yeah.
that tells us, I mean, that statistic is staggering. So that tells us that a lot of people are struggling with chronic anxiety, chronic depression, probably a lot of autoimmune disease, even that's triggering, not sleeping well. So I'm going to speak to anybody who's struggling with anything silently. I would challenge you to act for yourself. And I know that that feels very vulnerable. It feels vulnerable to just check with one more doctor, just like I did with my Lyme, right? Like, I didn't want to check with one more doctor because I had
Awesome.
already been treated poorly with one more, by several other doctors. And it might feel vulnerable to check with one more coach or one more therapist because maybe it hasn't worked out with others. Or it might feel vulnerable to check with your wife or your husband and say, hey, I need to get help with this. It might feel vulnerable, but I will say this, that powerful things occur when we are willing to step through vulnerability for ourselves. Marriages are saved, lives are saved, health improves, happiness comes, peace comes when we are willing to step through vulnerability for ourselves. So that would be my challenge for anybody who's
Mm.
struggling silently.
That sounds like it's the first step for someone who's currently in the thick of it, whether battling a diagnosis or just feeling emotionally stuck, is just,
Absolutely.
yep, work through that.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I would love for my audience to know how to find you and work with you and where your books are. It looks like you've got several trainings, classes, retreats that just passed. Do you have one upcoming?
Yeah. So I have a women's retreat, just a day retreat coming in May
Okay.
3rd. I'm super excited about this. It's going to be at the Rock and Willow Ranch just outside of Alexandria here in Minnesota. So it's going to be a really great day. It's really based off of the book, The Mountains We Climb, but it's Resilience Rising, and this is a women's retreat.
Mm,
But I do, yeah, a lot of classes and a lot of retreats. That's the one that's coming up right now. And all of that can be found on my website, coachaimej.com. As far as coaching, you can find me here in Minnesota at New Hope, or I do virtual coaching as well. So you can contact me again through my website at coachaimej.com. And my books are available on Amazon as well and should be able to be ordered in any bookstore as well. So, yeah.
wonderful, wonderful. And I'll add those to the show notes. Is there anything that we haven't talked about or anything that you would like to leave my audience members with?
I think so. I think we covered it.
Okay, great. Well, I have one more question before we go, and that is After all that you've gone through and after all the people that you might have worked with that have gone through the same thing or have emotional struggles or are struggling with something chronic, what does it mean for you to live with an awakened heart?
I love that question. That's a good
Mhm.
question. What does it mean for me to live with an awakened heart? I was just having this conversation with a client yesterday,
Mm.
and I asked her, we were having this conversation like, what does she want? And I said to her, again, I was talking about I'm going to be 50 this year. And I was saying to my husband this year or this the other day, I want this half of my life to just be what I want. I've spent so much of this life fighting to be healthy, healing from things that have happened to me. And I want this half of my life to just be peace and happiness and just leading the way to light. Like, I just want to be. And I think that's what it means. I think that's what it means. Like, I have an awakened heart now, and I just want to be.
Mhm.
Instead of struggling to get somewhere, I just wanna be here now.
Mhm. And it's like the polarity, the light and the dark. All those years, there's been some light in the dark times, but it's a whole new fresh start. It's a whole new decade left feast.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
love that question.
lean into that with an awakened heart. Beautiful.
Mhm.
Well, thank you, Amy, so much for coming on the Awaken Heart podcast and sharing your vulnerability and your stories and such valuable insights.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, you too.
Oh, and happy birthday, fellow Aries.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Awaken Heart podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, share it with a friend. And if you haven't already, head on over to your favorite podcast app to subscribe, rate, and review. If you have any comments, questions, or feedback, you can reach me at theawakenheartpodcast.com.